Sister-in-law opened the front door, looked at me, looked at my daughter, and said, "Oh, you actually came." Not later, not quietly, not later, over the phone, in the dry bear, and the dry bear, and the dry bear, in the dry bear. She'd forgotten she placed. It was the Saturday before Thanksgiving. November in Sudbury means the kind of cold that gets inside your coat before you even zip it up. Fiona was strapped to my chest in the carrier, 14 months old. Her little talk already half off her head because she'd been pulling at it the whole drive from Barrie. 4.5 hours. I'd left at 6 in the morning to beat the 400. I smiled. I said, "Hi, Lynette." She stepped aside to let me in, but not by much. That should have been my first clue. But I've been ignoring clues from that family for 3 years, so I guess one more wasn't going to break me. I want to back up, because none of this makes sense unless you know what the last 3 years actually looked like. I met my ex-husband. I'll call him my ex, because that's what he is now, when I was 26. We were together for 4 years, married for 1, separated for the last 8 months. The divorce isn't final yet. In Canada, that takes a year of separation minimum, and we're not there quite yet, but we're close. We don't have children together. Fiona is mine. I had her through a sperm donor, a decision I made at 30, because I wasn't willing to keep waiting for a life that kept not happening. My ex knew about Fiona before we got serious. He said he was fine with it. He said a lot of things. His family, though. His family had opinions about Fiona that they mostly kept to themselves until they didn't. His mother, I'll call her my mother-in-law, even though that title feels like a coat that doesn't fit anymore. She's 63, lives in Sudbury in the same house she raised her kids in, and has very specific ideas about what a family is supposed to look like. Fiona from the beginning was an asterisk in those ideas, a footnote, the thing that didn't quite fit the sentence. She was never cruel about it, not at first. She was just absent. When everyone gathered around a new baby at a family event, she'd be the one refreshing her coffee. When Fiona learned to clap and I was showing anyone who would look, my mother-in-law found something to do in the kitchen. It was the particular coldness of being ignored, which is somehow worse than being attacked, because you can't point to it. You can't say she did this. You can only say she wasn't there, and people will tell you maybe she's just not a baby person. But here's what people didn't know. Here's the part I kept quiet about, because I was embarrassed, honestly, and because I thought if I was patient enough and generous enough, everything would eventually even out. In the last 3 years, I gave that family a lot of money. Not later, over the phone, in the drive-till, over the phone, in the drive-there, in the driver's into farmhouse, and I was serious. His parents' furnace died. It was January. Temperatures were hitting -25 and they needed a new unit fast. My ex was between contracts. He's in IT, freelance. The income is real, but it's uneven. And his sister Lynette and her husband had just bought their place and were stretched thin. I had a stable job, RN at a hospital in Barrie, good salary, union. I said I could help. I transferred my mother-in-law $2,000. She texted back a thumbs up emoji. Not lengthy, not wave later, a pre-5 this. A thumbs up. I told myself that was just her style. Some people aren't effusive. Fine. Then there was my father-in-law's truck. Transmission went in March, $600 to keep it running. I covered half because my ex asked me to, and I loved him, and I wanted to be part of this family. Then there was the thing with my brother-in-law, Lynette's husband. I'll call him my brother-in-law, who needed to borrow $800 to cover a gap between paychecks because they'd had unexpected vet bills for their dog. He said he'd pay me back in 6 weeks. That was 2 years ago. There was a family trip to a cottage in Muskoka that I quietly paid most of the deposit for because my mother-in-law had organized it for everyone and then disclosed the cost at the last minute in a way that made it clear she expected it to be covered somehow, and somehow became me. There was Lynette's birthday dinner at a restaurant in Sudbury where the bill came and everyone looked at their phones and I put my card down because I couldn't stand the silence. By the time my marriage started cracking, I had put somewhere around $11,000 into that family. Not as loans, not formally anyway, as goodwill. As I want you to love me and my daughter, so I will make myself useful. My ex and I separated in February. I won't go into all of it. It wasn't dramatic. It was the slow realization that we had built something structurally unsound and that keeping it standing was costing us both more than it was worth. We were sad about it in the end. Sad and tired. He moved into a place in Barrie. I kept the apartment we'd been renting. What I didn't expect was what his family did after. His mother called me once, the week we announced the separation. She asked if there was anything she could do. I said I was okay, thank you. She said, okay. And that was the last time she initiated contact. Lynette unfollowed me on Instagram within 48 hours. My brother-in-law, who owed me $800, stopped responding to texts. And then, in September, my mother-in-law called to invite me to Thanksgiving. I know what you're thinking. I thought it too. But here's the thing. She was warm on the phone, warmer than she'd been in years actually. She said it would be strange not to have me there, that I'd been part of the family for so long, that Fiona should know her people. Those were her words. Fiona should know her people. I wanted to believe it so badly that I decided to believe it. I took 2 days off work. I borrowed my friend's car because mine was in the shop. I packed for myself and a toddler, which anyone with a toddler knows is basically packing for a small expedition. Portable crib, 2 bags of clothes because toddlers are chaotic, snacks, her bunny, her sound machine, the specific sippy cup she will actually drink from. I drove 4.5 hours north in November. I stood on that doorstep in the cold, and Jeanette looked at me like I was an Uber Eats order she'd forgotten she placed. Inside, the house smelled like turkey and something sweet. Maybe the cranberry sauce my mother-in-law makes from scratch. It's actually incredible, that cranberry sauce. I've thought about it since, which feels pathetic, but there it is. The living room was full. My mother-in-law was in the kitchen. My father-in-law was in his chair watching the game. My brother-in-law was on his phone on the couch. There were a couple of cousins I'd met once or twice, a neighbor who'd apparently been coming to Thanksgiving for years. Fiona immediately lunged toward a basket of decorative gourds on the floor, which is extremely on brand for her. My mother-in-law came out of the kitchen when she heard me. She hugged me, which surprised me. It was brief and she smelled like sage and butter. She looked at Fiona and said, "Oh, she's getting big," with the exact tone you use when you're acknowledging a fact rather than expressing delight. I sat down. I tried to make conversation. I asked my father-in-law about the game. I asked my brother-in-law about work. I chased Fiona away from the gourds twice, then gave up and let her examine one under close supervision. Lunch wasn't ready until 2. I kept Fiona on my lap during the meal, which is just the reality of dining with a 14-month-old. They want to be where you are. They want to touch everything. They're loud, they're delightful, they have the table manners of a very enthusiastic raccoon. I brought her own food, her own little container of the things she reliably eats, so I wasn't asking anyone to accommodate her. We were about halfway through the meal when my mother-in-law said it. She'd been watching Fiona bang a piece of turkey against the tray of her portable clip-on seat, the way toddlers do. She was watching with that particular expression, not hostile, just removed, like she was observing something through glass. And then she said, quietly but not quietly enough, to Lynette, "I don't know why she brought the baby. It's a lot for everyone." I heard it. The cousin across from me heard it. I saw her eyes slick to me and then away. Lynette said nothing. I put my fork down. I have replayed this moment many times since, thinking about what I should have said, what I could have said, whether I handled it right. What I actually did was very calm. I think I was calm because something cold and clear settled in my chest, like ice forming, and it made me very still. I said, "I'm sorry, a lot for everyone." "In what way?" My mother-in-law looked up. I don't think she'd expected me to respond. She said, "Oh, I just meant it's a lot of commotion. For the little ones too." She seems overwhelmed. Fiona was not overwhelmed. Fiona was aggressively content. She had graduated from banging turkey to squishing a piece of sweet potato in her fist with the focused satisfaction of an artist at work. I said, "She seems pretty happy to me." The table went quiet. My father-in-law looked at the game. My brother-in-law looked at his phone. Lynette cut a piece of her turkey with more precision than it required. my mother-in-law said. I just wonder if it's the right environment for her. And there it was. Not phone, and everyone, for her, for Fiona, the wrong environment. I sat with that for a moment, and in that moment I thought about the furnace, the truck, the $800 that was never repaid, the cottage deposit, the birthday dinner, the $11,000 I had quietly, consistently, lovingly handed to this family because I wanted to belong to it. I thought about Lynette's face at the front door. Oh, you actually came. I thought about my daughter, who had done nothing wrong, who was sitting there covered in sweet potato, happy as she has ever been in her 14 months of life, being described as a lot for everyone at a table she'd been invited to. I said, you know what, I've been wondering something too. My mother-in-law tilted her head slightly. I've been wondering, I said, when the $800 Ryan borrowed from me is coming back. I've sent him a few messages, but it's been almost 2 years. The table went very still. My brother-in-law, Ryan, put his phone down. I've also been wondering, I said, about the cottage deposit from last summer. I put in $2,200. We talked about sorting it out after the trip, but that got a bit lost. And the birthday dinner, I think, was around $350 all in, which is fine, these things happen, but that's not the time, Lynette said. I know, I said. Thanksgiving probably isn't the time, but I've been trying to find the right time for $800 for 2 years, so I thought I'd try now. My mother-in-law's face had done something complicated. She said, this is a family dinner. I said, I know. I thought I was family. She looked at me. Then she looked at Fiona. Then she said, in a voice that was almost gentle, which was the worst version of it, sweetheart, you and my son are separated. You understand this is a different situation now. I understand that, I said. I'm asking about money I lent, not about being invited to Christmas. Those are separate things. Ryan will sort it out, she said. Ryan did not look up. I nodded. I unclipped Fiona from her seat. I started gathering our things, her bunny, her cup, the little container that still had food in it. I was methodical about it. I didn't rush because I didn't want to look like I was fleeing. I was leaving, which is different. You don't have to go, Lynette said, and to her credit, she sounded like she meant it, at least a little. I know, I said, but I think we will. I got Fiona into her snowsuit in the front hall. She was cooperative about it, which she isn't always. Maybe she sensed something. 14-month-olds are more perceptive than people think. She patted my face while I did up the zipper, and I said quietly, just to her, we're okay, monkey, because we were. My mother-in-law appeared in the hallway as I was pulling on my own coat. She said, you should know that I have always cared about you. I believed her in some version of it. I think she had cared about me the way you care about something useful, warmly, until the utility changes. I said, thank you for the invitation. I didn't say, and the cranberry sauce was wonderful, even though it was. That felt like too much grace for the moment. I opened the door. The cold hit us both, Fiona and me. She buried her face in my neck. I drove out of Sudbury with my daughter asleep in the car seat by the time I hit the highway south. The trees were bare on both sides of the road. It gets dark early in November and the sky was already going grey by 4 o'clock. I had a podcast I'd been meaning to listen to, some true crime thing a co-worker had recommended, but I didn't turn it on. I just drove. I thought about what I was going to do. By the time I passed Parry Sound, I knew. I had my ex-husband's contact saved as his first name in my phone. We're civil, he and I. Separation was his idea originally, but I'd agreed with it and we've been adult about things, mostly. I voice messaged him when I stopped for gas in Parry Sound. I said, look, I'm not trying to make anything difficult, but I lent your family some money over the years and I need it back. I gave him the number, just the amounts I could document, which came to $4,650. I said I'd send an e-transfer request, and I'd appreciate if he'd encourage his family to settle it. He called me back before I got back on the highway. He said, I didn't know it was that much. I said, I know you didn't. He said, I'll talk to them. I said, thank you. That was it. That was the whole conversation. When I got home and Fiona was in bed and I had made myself a cup of tea and sat down at my kitchen table in Bidri, sent a message to my mother-in-law, not angry. I have learned in my 32 years that anger in text form almost never produces the result you want. I was factual. I said that I'd had a lot of time to reflect on our relationship, and I realized I had been contributing financially to the family out of a desire to be included and valued, and that I didn't think that arrangement had served either of us well. I said I wished her well. I said I thought it was best if I wasn't in contact with her for a while. I pressed send before I could edit it into softness. She did not reply. Lynette did, 3 days later. She said she was sorry about how Thanksgiving went. She said her mother has a way sometimes. She said she hoped Fiona and I were doing well. I read it a few times. Then I replied, thank you, I appreciate that, and I left it there. Ryan sent me $200 by e-transfer the following week with no message. Then another $200 the week after. We're on a payment plan now, I suppose, unspoken. I'll take it. My ex-husband paid me the remainder of what I could document out of his own pocket. He did it in one transfer, with a note that said, I'm sorry things got complicated. I sat with that for a while. He's a decent person. We just weren't right together. And the family he came from had a shape that didn't have room for me, not really, and definitely not for my daughter. I think about Fiona's face that afternoon, the way she patted my cheek in the front hall. She doesn't know what happened, won't remember any of it. But I'll remember for both of us, and I'll remember it as the day I stopped trying to pay my way into a room that didn't want me. She's 14 months old. She's covered in sweet potato half the time, and she's the funniest person I know, and she is the whole point of everything. And we drove home, the two of us, through the dark and the bare trees and the early November night, and I didn't look back once. There's a thing that happens when you finally stop. And I don't mean stop arguing or stop attending dinners or stop answering calls. I mean stop performing. Stop being the person who fills the silence with her credit card, who drives 4.5 hours in November because she's afraid that if she doesn't show up, she'll confirm what she already suspects, that there was never really a seat for her at that table. I drove home from Sudbury with Fiona asleep in the back seat, and I kept waiting to feel something big. Rage, maybe. Or grief. But mostly what I felt was quiet. Not the numb kind. The real kind. The kind that comes when something that's been humming in the background for years finally shuts off and you realize how much noise it was making. I think about the choices I made in that family and I don't think they were stupid exactly. I think I was doing what I believed was right. Showing up. Contributing. Trying to build something. That's not foolish. That's a person operating from her values. The mistake wasn't generosity. The mistake was not asking whether the generosity was landing in a place that could receive it. You can be a good person and still put your energy somewhere it will never take root. Those two things aren't contradictions. What I had to learn, and I'm still learning it, sitting at my kitchen table in Barrie with a cup of tea that went cold an hour ago, is that integrity isn't just about how you treat other people. It's about whether you treat yourself with the same honesty. I had been watching for 3 years, the evidence in front of me. The thumbs up emoji, the unfollowing, the $800 that became $200 a month on an unspoken schedule. The way my mother-in-law looked at Fiona like she was a complication rather than a person. I saw all of it. I just kept choosing the interpretation that let me stay comfortable because leaving, even just emotionally, felt like admitting I'd miscalculated. And I hadn't wanted to be someone who miscalculates. But wisdom isn't about never getting it wrong. It's about being honest enough with yourself to look at the evidence, sit with it, and update. It's uncomfortable work. It requires you to say, I was giving to a situation that wasn't giving back, and I kept giving anyway because I was afraid of what it meant if I stopped. That's not a character flaw. That's human. But the moment you see it clearly, you're responsible for what you do next. What I did next was drive south on the phone with my daughter asleep and my hands steady on the wheel. I sent a voice message from a gas station in Parry Sound. I wrote a text I didn't soften. I asked for what I was owed, not because I needed every dollar back, but because asking was the truest version of what I believed, that I had value, that Fiona had value, and that neither of us needed to earn a seat at someone's table by subsidizing the chairs. That's the part that took the most out of me, honestly. Not the confrontation at the table, which lasted maybe 4 minutes. The months before it, when I knew and didn't act. Courage isn't the absence of hesitation. It's moving through the hesitation anyway, when everything in you wants to smooth it over one more time and choosing not to. Fiona won't remember that Thanksgiving, but I remember driving home, the sky going dark over the trees, her small breathing in the back seat, and the feeling, clear and quiet as ice forming, that we were exactly where we were supposed to be.